Are we? We
And we're
are
live.
live. We're live. Hello. I love when I'm live. I love it's better than the alternative, right? I'm so excited to be here live with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Stephen Masley. And some of you have met him before. We've done lives together before. I'm very excited to be here because he's got a new book and he's traveled in the meantime since we saw him last. And you look at 10 years younger, so the travel must have agreed with you. And he traveled around on a sailboat in the Mediterranean and around Europe, and came back with some really great tips and wrote a book while he was gone. So welcome, Dr. Stephen Masley.
Hey, Rita Marie, I'm thrilled to be with you. This is great.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I'm excited about your book. And we were just talking about the pretty cover, you know, very good. Um, but I wanted to really get into, like, you had this travels around Europe, and you wrote a book called The Mediterranean Method. So what was it that inspired you to write the book? Was it going there and seeing this stuff, or did you go there because you had this thought about the diet and wanted to write?
Well, I've had actually quite a bit of experience in the Mediterranean. In medical school, I spent, even before medical school, in college, I took a break year, a gap year. That was before even they even knew what it was. So
Yeah.
back in the 1970s, I spent a year in Europe. I worked as
Whoa.
a sailboat captain in southern France. I worked in a ski shop in Switzerland, and I had a break, and the food was amazing. It was awesome. And I loved that cultural experience. So in medical school, I went back to Europe again. And since I've traveled there many times, and my wife is a French citizen. So it definitely, we go see family there, which is like a very different experience than being a tourist. And it's always seemed to me like they had great health and sense and a lifestyle that really matched. And I read about the Mediterranean diet for years. I mean, there's thousands of articles I've reviewed on this. So, and I thought, I should go to Europe and spend time researching it. And what better way would there be than to sail from Spain to Turkey on a sailboat and stop at little ports along the way, pick up recipes, and try to understand why is that lifestyle and that food so healthy. So that was my research job. I had to pinch myself sometimes just to, because I was really getting to do it. It
Yeah.
was so fun, so amazing, and I learned just an incredible amount of material.
And you were gone for a while, wasn't it? Wasn't it like 7 months or something?
3 months last year and 7 months this year.
Wow. And you're going back, aren't you?
And going back, yeah, for a bit.
Sounds awesome. So I want to know what you learned. Like, what was it that you learned by being there that you didn't maybe have a full grasp of, or maybe you did, but what was it that you
Well,
learned
you can
about?
read, you and I read scientific articles all the time. It's kind of, I think of myself as a nerd in a positive sense. I like to read about this stuff. But it's a very different thing to go there and just go to a small village in Spain and France and Italy or Greece and say, okay, what's your favorite regional dish and how do you make it? And you ask the people in the market, the guy pumping gas at the gas station, the taxi driver, they're all passionate about their food, specific ingredients you use and why, and how you cook them and how much heat you use, and the type of, olive oil and whether it's in season or not. So this whole idea of eating fresh, local, seasonal food, mostly plant-based, that's beautiful, that's flavorful and delicious. I mean, it just resonates with the population. And I think we need to get more of that here in the US, and Canada for that matter, and help more people appreciate that food can be delicious, fantastic, really good for you, and you can still find it. It doesn't have to be that hard to get.
Well, that's my philosophy, right? We really need to be eating real food, as fresh as possible, and mostly plants. So, but my experience in traveling in Europe wasn't exactly like that. I mean, my first time in Europe was ages and ages ago, like 30 something years ago, and I wasn't into health then. So I don't know what the experience was. I just knew I had great food. But about 21 years ago. I was back in Europe. We were in Spain and Portugal, and we even sailed across to Morocco from there. And I wasn't feeling like it was that easy to get fresh food. So tell me more about your experience. Is it like you have to be in the small villages? The big cities become more westernized?
It's going to the market and the growth. I mean,
Okay.
it's not, you know, you don't eat in restaurant. When you're a tourist, you're eating in restaurants 21 meals a week almost.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you might have an occasional picnic and maybe you skip breakfast, you get a little ketosis going, but at least 14 meals a week, you're eating out in a restaurant. And that's not, people walk to the grocery store, oftentimes the market, every day or every other day at most. They don't go shopping once a week and fill up the fridge and the freezer with food. They do it on a daily basis. They buy what's fresh and local, and they're very much into eating in season, something that we don't do nearly enough of, being aware of what's in season and how that eating ins the food in season, a peach when it's ripe in season or a butternut squash in season is hormonally correct and probably help with inflammation and help us tune to the environment by doing that. So I had the experience that they're very passionate about their food, and their food's a lot cheaper than ours. For a third or half the price, they're getting wonderful, fantastic produce that I can't find any, you know, I've never been able to find in the US. I mean, just very picky about the quality. It was just picked like the day before when it was perfectly ripe. And if it wasn't, they don't care so much about, is the tomato a perfect round shape and is the color perfect? But the flavor has to be perfect in that tomato, or they'll be embarrassed to sell it, and they won't, if they buy it, they'll return it.
Interesting. That's interesting, because here we're all about everything being perfect, which is why the pesticides and the herbicides have come, you know, to kind of take over what's going on in the U.S. produce market. And because we have to, it has to be perfect. You know, the heirlooms, you think about that, as we move back to heirlooms, those don't look so perfect, right? They're a little weird shape, they have weird colors on them, and those don't tend to be the popular things here in the U.S.
So flavor is what really matters,
Yeah.
you know, in Europe, and the quality is amazing. I mean, that just and because it's not shipped all over the country or all over, you know, it's local, and because it's in season, and because people buy in bulk when it's in season, the prices are dramatically less.
Mm-hmm. So when you say they buy in bulk, like the individual buys in bulk?
Well, you know, they'll buy, you know, if the peaches are out, they'll buy a bag of peaches. If, you know, it's when the tomatoes are ready, they're out buying tomatoes. They'll go buy and make, you know, cook up a big batch and serve it. And, you know, they're cooking for families and friends. So it's not just what they eat, it's also how they eat. Lunch and dinner are long, leisurely meals. I don't think we ever ate a meal in less than 90 minutes.
Wow. That's very cool.
Certainly not eating out. And, you know, because just the pace that they serve you, you talk about food, you enjoy it. It's a whole experience. They wouldn't even think of, you know, they don't snack, which is very different.
Mm-hmm.
And they eat at a table with food, with people. So there's not a TV on or a computer going or tapping on the phone. Saw very little of that when you're in a restaurant or when you're eating or in people's homes when they're eating.
Yeah, I like that idea. Tell me
very
more
mindful
about from your experience. You know, you've been very successful in your medical practice, and you've written a book on cardiac health. You've written a book on brain health. You've written a book on fat. So how we eat? I love that, because people find that intriguing. How you eat, in addition to what you eat,
yes,
affect the state of your body and the organs.
Yeah, and I think that social connection over meals, it's so calming. You know, they have much lower rates of anxiety and depression in Europe than we do in the US. And I think we're so disconnected from people. We might be connected by our phones, but that's not the same thing as sitting down and holding someone's hand and having a laugh or a cry together. I mean, it doesn't match that. So much we could learn, I think, from some other cultures and how they eat, let alone that, you know, the Mediterranean diet was ranked the #1 healthiest diet on the planet now 3 years in a row, 3 years in a row by the U.S. News and World Report.
So tell us what is a Mediterranean diet and how does it differ from U.S. diet?
Well, it's very diverse. So we're thinking it's an accumulation of cuisine from Spain, Italy, France, Greece, Turkey, Northern Africa, Morocco. I mean, all these places. But what they have in common is that it's mostly plant-based. They eat lots of vegetable, fruit, beans, nuts. They use olive oil as their predominant fat, like it's probably 80 to 90% of all the fat they use. Yes, they eat avocados and they might cook at high heat with avocado oil or almond oil, but it's mostly extra virgin olive oil. They use lots of Mediterranean spices like Italian herbs and garlic and oregano and thyme and rosemary and an abundance of these anti-inflammatory herbs that taste so wonderful.
Herbs alone are just abundant in antiviral and anti-inflammatory and antioxidant protection.
They do drink red wine with dinner, so they'll have 1 or 2 glasses, but mostly they drink water. You know, their predominant beverage is water. When you sit down in a restaurant or at someone's home, you either get a bottle of sparkling or flat. And then you might get a glass of wine, but the big deal is you're going to drink a bottle of water with that. That's the main beverage. They drink tea and coffee in the morning, but water most of the day. They're not vegan, vegetarian. They have small amounts of dairy. The dairy they don't drink milk so much, but they have yogurt. So, and it's a great probiotic source. I mean, certainly someone who's vegan, vegetarian could just use coconut yogurt instead, and it would, easily replace that. They do eat seafood 2 to 3 times a week at least, but seafood includes fish, shellfish, and seaweed. So if you're a vegetarian vegan, you could just eat seaweed, like a seaweed salad several times a week, or take a DHA supplement. Right. What they don't eat, have red meat seldom. I won't say never, but it's seldom. And they have an aversion to processed food, to sweeteners, to sugar, to chemicals, to hormones in their food. They want pure, unadulterated, fresh, local food that is just simple. It's not a long list of chemicals to it. It's something you can buy and you don't have to read the ingredient pack. I mean, because there's not much to it.
Yeah, it's great. Well, but I think about French food, though. I think Italian food, I think of simplicity, but French, we always think of as creamy, elaborate kinds of dishes.
Well, that's northern France. The Mediterranean part of France is actually, the cuisines in France are very different, just like we have different cuisine in the US.
Yeah.
So in the north, like Normandy and Bretagne, and so up north, that's where they produce more dairy, and you'll have more cheese sauces. And yes, you do see that. But the south is much more, instead of cream, you're going to see olive oil and olives and Mediterranean vegetables and fruits. And it's a very different style.
Would you say that's similar in Italy? Italy is.
Yeah, if you're up in Milano, up in the north, or in the mountainous region, it's more like Austrian. You can even verge on German if you like food. They wouldn't call it that. It's just their own local. And as you go further south, and as you're more as you in the Mediterranean, when you go inland in the big cities, you'll see more meat consumed and more fast food restaurants. And as you get into smaller towns and more coastal, you see a lot less of that.
So a couple of things I want to ask you. One is, what are the actual benefits to it? And I know in your book, you took a slightly different flair. It was your version of the Mediterranean diet. So I want to hear about that as well.
So, I mean, probably the #1 diet has been studied in many, epidemiologic case studies, randomized clinical trials. Is the probably #1 for preventing heart disease is the Mediterranean diet. We don't have anything that really can compare with that. There's these ultra low fat diets like Ornish or Esselstyn, and those are clearly better than the sad American diet, the standard sad American diet with all that processed food. But I think they missed something by not using healthy fats, like from avocado and nuts. And I think the studies have shown clearly that if you add olive oil and you add nuts, you get better outcomes, not just for your heart, but for your brain. People who were in this heart study and they monitored their brain function. Not only did the people on the low-fat diet have an increased progression to dementia, and they had far less progression, far less memory loss in the Mediterranean diet, but people's cognitive function improved. They actually got better as they ate these healthy fats. So I think finally, there's almost undisputed evidence that healthy fats are good for us and they're here to stay.
Yeah,
And
it's interesting because the proponents of these low-fat diets, it's like they're taking the certain fats that are damaging and throwing out the good stuff with it. So, for example, I theorize that the low-fat diets tend to have help the people with that ApoE44 gene, where they just don't handle saturated fats, but they can handle non-saturated fats. But it's kind of like the American way. We kind of generalize things. Fat is bad, sugar is
yeah,
bad.
I mean, they oversimplify, like really, sugar is a carb we don't want, and broccoli and, grapes are ones we do. So, I mean, they're not fair to compare them, so I think, yes, adding more vegetable fruit, beans, nuts, even some whole grains, and getting rid of bad fats, huge improvement over the standard American diet.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
adding
Oh, yeah.
smart fats to it even makes it better. I think you and I have been kind of on board with this for some time. But I think what makes the Mediterranean diet special is it's also very anti-inflammatory and it's loaded with antioxidant potential. It's colorful. It has tons of colorful vegetable, fruit, beans, which are antioxidant rich, and the spices are very anti-inflammatory. So it's probably one of the most antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potent diets that we've ever studied.
That's pretty cool. So what is it that you shifted about it? You said that you kind of did a skinny twist.
Well, I think there's a myth out there that you can just eat tons of pasta and rice and pizza and bread and call it Mediterranean and think it's healthy. And maybe just pour some olive oil on it and it's good, right? You got this bucket of pasta, so let's just pour some olive oil on it and say, okay, now it's healthy. Well, that's way too much sugar load, what I call glycemic load. So I wanted to look at and when you look at the number one causes for the top 3 causes of death in America today are like heart disease, dementia, diabetes. It's sugar. We need less sugar. So I'm really looking at a low glycemic approach. And there was the EPIC trial out of Greece, which looked at components of the Mediterranean diet. For one, the part that had the least benefit were the grains. Of all the key components of the diet, grains appeared to have the least benefit of all, probably because of their glycemic load. And when they looked at following a Mediterranean diet and lower glycemic load, that combination of low glycemic load and more Mediterranean diet adherence was the best outcomes for all health measures.
Okay.
So that's really what I'm looking at is if you have pasta, it's a tiny portion. Avoid the bread, avoid the pizza. We don't need more sugar. We need more real food from vegetable, fruit, beans, nuts, olive oil, spices and herbs, and clean protein.
The antioxidant capacity, but also the fiber, which you didn't mention, the richness of the fiber in those foods.
So, and yeah, I mean, it's a very fiber-rich diet, and it not necessarily, you could get fiber from whole wheat flour, but has a high glycemic load. And so that's really what I'm trying to, take the best of low glycemic load, Mediterranean diet, put them together for the healthiest diet on the planet.
I like that idea of taking, what seems to be studied as a good diet and making it even better, right? Because that's the thing that's always bothered me, the breads and the pastas. When I was over in Italy a couple of years ago, there was just everywhere you went, it was the big baskets of bread and everybody was serving pizza, right?
And the 3 components, if you wanted to add a vegetarian twist to this, a vegan twist, would be you need a source of B12, but you could easily get that in a multivitamin or some other source.
Yeah.
You need a probiotic source, but Now, I mean, I think in 10 years ago, we might have been stretched for that, right? But today, between coconut yogurt or Coke, all these other beverages and sauerkraut and kimchi and
Yeah, it's all
kombucha, I mean,
over.
it's all over. So
All
that's
over.
no, and you need some sorts of long chain omega-3s. You can't just eat flaxseed and get it. But again, seaweed or a DHA supplement from seaweed is a perfect way to deliver that. So yes, you could eat seafood, but you don't need to eat seafood and you can still get all the benefits. You just need to make sure you get your omega-3s somehow. So
Well, it
those of
sounds
you who want
like
to put a
you're doing
vegan twist to it, that's how I would suggest you'd need to do it. Whether you're vegan or not, you have that option.
Absolutely. And I think that, I personally am not a big fan of dairy, although, the dairy here is very different than dairy in other places where it might be cultured. I mean, cultured dairy is very different, raw dairy versus that, but I'm a big fan of staying away from it. So we use the coconut yogurt, make coconut yogurt really easy to do, cashew yogurt, sunflower seed, hemp seed yogurt. I've made all kinds of yogurts. And it's
I mean, the biggest benefit of the dairy is really the probiotic.
the
It's
probiotic.
drinking kefir and yogurt in some way, whether it
Yeah.
has dairy protein or not, that's optional.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. So I was going to ask you a few more questions, and my screen just blanked out, and I don't have any other questions. So I wanted to show them again. It's the Mediterranean diet, and you can get it, and I'll put the link into the chat at shortened link. Your link was way too long for me, so I shortened it. drritamarie.com/Mediterranean. And that will get you access to, tell us what that gets them access to.
Well, if they buy the book, wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, you name it, send the receipt. I love getting people to cook. I know you do too. That's kind of one of our mutual passions.
That's the other thing about you. You're the doctor in the kitchen because
yeah, I did a chef internship, and so yeah, I'm a physician nutritionist and really a trained chef. There's not many doctors out there who are trained chefs. So, and I don't work in a restaurant, so I don't call myself a chef, but I have that in my training, and I think of how can I get people to cook at home in their kitchen? That's really my goal. And so I've made up some cooking videos, cooking classes on video form that if I want to give away for free to anybody who gets the book so they can join in. And it's just some of my favorite tips. How do you make incorporating the benefits of Mediterranean, the health benefits of Mediterranean cooking, and make your food delicious at the same time? How do you combine spices and herbs together? How do you use extra virgin olive oil so it doesn't get burned at high heat? Just little things you could do that really make a big difference in making your family and friends love the food you cook. It nourishes your heart, brain, and soul, and you can still find the ingredients in your town.
You can find them, yeah, and it's maybe not on every corner like in Europe it might be, because we don't have those little produce markets as much anymore. Right, you have to go to the big stores, but more and more they're stocking organics. Even our local grocery stores stock organics. And it helps to get organic because we don't want to add toxins to the mix, especially if we have any brain or heart problems.
Well, it's a sad truth that more and more of our food is adulterated. I used to think, things like maybe oats were fine. They didn't, because just to find out, at this recent conference that if the oats aren't GMO, what they're doing is treating them with an herbicide, Roundup, to get them to dry out and increase the yield when they harvest them. So it didn't even occur to, I was thinking, okay, GMO oats, okay, they're spraying them with, glyphosate. I didn't want that.
Right.
But the idea that the ones that aren't, that they're still being sprayed at harvest time to increase the harvest yield, that's just like, are you kidding?
Crazy.
That's just like so insane. So why are you doing that? And it makes organic to me far more important than I ever realized before.
Certified organic.
If it's not, you don't really know.
No, you don't. You don't. And unfortunately, there's just so much crazy hype, and it's driven by the pharmaceuticals and the companies, the Monsantos and all, and they're merged now together with Bayer and Monsanto having merged. That you got the pharmaceuticals and you got the chemicals all in one place, and they're going to, of course, be supporting the adulteration of our food under the guise of we're making it more abundant and cheaper and all this kind of stuff. When in reality, it's just making them a whole lot of money.
Well, it's going to cost us a fortune in the end on the environment when it's all damaged.
Yeah,
So,
and our health, right? All the health
yes.
detriments. It's not worth it. So organic, lots of fresh produce, good whole. I like to use whole food plant-based fats. I know you mentioned olive oil a lot. I don't generally tend to use olive oil. I eat my olives, but if you are going to use oil, I think olive oil is a good choice. And not abundant, like you're pouring it on, right? You use it to, a little bit to saute your vegetables. You use a little bit over the top of your steamed vegetables to give it flavor. But I'm a big fan of avocado and coconut
Mhm.
and olives and nuts and seeds as your fat base.
Yeah, and when you use a little bit of olive oil, it actually pulls the flavor out of the
It
herbs and it
does.
pulls the anti-inflammatory activity. It actually increases the anti-inflammatory activity of your food by using a little bit of olive oil with the herbs when you cook it. You don't,
Well, there
as
you
you
go.
said,
That's
you
right.
don't need to be pouring on cups of it
No,
per
like
person.
tons
I
of
mean,
it.
that's way over the top.
No, it's over the top because it's calories, right? It's, you know, maybe good, but it's going to add calories without filling you up. And yeah.
It does add calories, but you know what was really interesting in all these Mediterranean studies where when they either added nuts or they added olive oil and they added up to a liter per week, they still lost weight.
Wow.
So adding your it's hard to explain, how do you why do they do this? That's a challenge, Are they more satisfied because the food tastes good?
Mm.
Is it that it lowers the glycemic load, which it does? So there's a satiety factor? Is the food just tastes so much better, you don't need to eat as much? I'm actually starting to believe that if you make food delicious, you won't eat it like it's an endless pot, endless bag, and you got to just keep going. A few bites might really be enough when the food's fantastic. So
Yeah.
I'm really starting to get taken over by this Mediterranean thought that if your food's fantastic, you'll be more satisfied, you'll eat more slowly,
Mm.
and you can enjoy it more.
Eating more slowly is one of the tricks to eating less because usually your brain doesn't catch up and get the signal that you're full until 10 minutes after you've already reached that saturation point. And so many of us tend to overeat. We go to restaurants and they serve these
Yes.
humongous portions. And so that's a big trick. Like, and it's a trick to longevity too. Like all the longevity studies show, when we eat less, we live longer because we preserve ourselves. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean so it's eating more slowly, eating with people, eating joyfully, happily.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot for that. And Europeans, and it's not just the food, they're more active than we are. They spend more time with nature. When you actually count time outdoor under the sun, enjoying it,
Right.
they walk outdoors a lot. They go in the woods, they bike ride. In the US, we've had this gym thing, right? Let me be honest. I have gone to the gym almost every day for the last 20 years.
Oh.
Just on trips, at a conference, when I went to the clinic, there's a gym in the building. I spent an hour in the gym 6 to 7 days a week for 2 decades. They don't do that so much in Europe. They're much more likely to go for a jog or a bike ride with a friend or a walk to the market or go out into the woods and walk and have a picnic. It's very different kind of activity. So I think there is also something about being with nature outside under the sun that has additional benefit that you can't get in a gym environment.
I totally agree with that. I am not a gym person. I had a gym membership for I don't know how many years, and I went a few times a year. Um, but to me, I like to be outdoors. So I go outdoors and I run or I hike. I go to our waterfall, and to just it's more than just exercise, right? It's just this just fills me with this amazing feeling of satisfaction and joy. So I think
Yes.
that's a big part of it too. We spend too much time indoors, don't we? We spend too much time under the artificial lights and in electromagnetic fields, breathing in fumes from our paints and our rugs and all this stuff. When go outside and run your feet through the grass and move outside. If you're going to exercise, do yoga on the lawn. right? Instead of in a gym. So I wholeheartedly love that concept. And I noticed that you didn't call this the Mediterranean diet. You called it the Mediterranean method. And the more we talk, the more I realize why. Because it's not just a diet, right? It's a
Yeah,
lifestyle.
there is the food, and the
Yes.
food is really beneficial. And there's a good, but there's much more to it. And I tried to put, and I learned so much sailing across the Mediterranean and living and working with people that I want to put in, that's in the Mediterranean method, on how can we incorporate some of those wonderful aspects of lifestyle and make us healthier and happier and more sane.
All right. So you've talked about all this great food. And you said, and I'll tell you again, if you go to drritamarie.com/Mediterranean, you can get, and you buy the book on any of the booksellers, Amazon or Borders, or you even walk into the bookstore and you buy the book there. Who does that anymore? Not a lot of people, but
Yes,
I
it's
used to
just
live.
get the receipt and turn it in on that link and you'll get the free
You,
cooking
yeah.
classes.
So give us an example of like a really good, and make it a plant-based kind of recipe that's in there that you think people would just go, oh wow, that's so
I mean,
simple and
you
so
know,
delicious.
so breakfast oftentimes, so you might appreciate this. When they eat they skip, I think they skip breakfast half the time.
Uh-huh.
They'll
There you
just have
go.
some tea or coffee. They'll eat lunch, they eat dinner, but they have probably a 12 to 15 hour period of no food
Mm,
several days per week.
nice.
And I like that. And I know you kind of like that as well.
Mm.
If they do, they might have something like yogurt with fruit and, you know, so you could have coconut yogurt and fruit and nuts and something like that. Um, the appetizers are a big part of eating. You know, olives and these giant capers and pickles and little onions and all of these things are probiotic rich. You know, it's like they put them in salt, they're fermenting. They're olives. I didn't realize capers until recently were really a very probiotic rich
I didn't
food,
know
just
that.
like pickles.
I didn't.
So it's these combinations of artichokes and other foods that they use for appetizers like antipasta.
Antipasta. My grandmother would say, let's sit down and have our antipasta.
But you know, like a Greek salad or a Spanish salad is like, they don't mix it all up like we do. They put it in little, a Spanish salad, a mixed Spanish salad is you have this little pile of shredded carrots and then there's shredded beets. And then you have your cucumbers here and some beans there. And it's gorgeous. It's
Mm.
just beautiful to look at what these things look like when we put them together. One of my favorite is roasting some beets and putting it with and roasting kale and sprinkling on some nuts on top and a drizzle of olive oil for a
Mm.
side dish. But they have many beans, I should say, are a really big part of the Mediterranean eating plan. Probably more so, beans have been, I think, not crucified, but um, beaten up by some paleo and keto diet plans.
Right.
I think unfairly, because beans have the highest antioxidant activity of any food ever tested. The ORAC scores, these oxidation reactive scores, are off the chart for blocking oxidation, which is a big part. And beans, all types of beans, are really loaded with protein, with calcium, with B vitamins and fiber. I mean,
Lots
it's
of
really
minerals. Yeah.
something we should eat much more of. So whether it's
Let me just
falafel
make a
or
caveat
bean
there.
soups,
Yeah, the bean soups are great. And there is some
bean side dishes, and fava beans, are very popular in Europe. They have them cooked whole, where you take like a whole fava bean, like a bean pod, and you put it in, you boil it for like 5 minutes, you take it out, drain it, and then you saute it lightly with olive oil and garlic and a little thyme. It's fantastic. But one of the hallmarks of how do you do a Mediterranean side dish, whether it's kale or Swiss chard or spinach, is you're going to put it in a pan, saute it a little bit, add a little bit of extra virgin olive oil at medium heat, medium low heat, add garlic, add a little lemon zest and a little squeeze of lemon. Those combined flavors of greens, garlic, olive oil, lemon, maybe a little bit of thyme or oregano. But the trick is not too many ingredients. Keep it simple. That's
Yeah.
good quality, kept simple, very few ingredients is like a mantra in Mediterranean cooking.
I
And it
love that
tastes
sound of that.
fantastic.
I love it. Whoops, I just lost my, I was just gonna look at
The roasted eggplant dish is just
oh, yes, tell me more. Tell me a
amazing.
roasted eggplant idea.
And then, for dessert, they're always serving fruit. And they don't just eat an apple. They'll slice up an apple. They'll slice up a pear. They'll put a little piece of dark chocolate with it. So many, you
Simple.
can do a little bubbly Moscatello, a little bit of, sweet wine goes on a bowl of berries. I mean, here's the amazing thing. In Europe, if you get an appetizer and an entree, dessert's usually free. They don't charge,
Really?
they
They
give
don't
you
charge for
fruit for
dessert?
free. Everywhere we were in Spain and well, in France, more or less, they had more high-end desserts and you had to pay for those. But if you're just getting fruit, that's part of the meal that just comes with it.
Oh, sweet. Sweet. I remember being in Italy and everybody gelato was the big thing. And so I don't do dairy and I don't do sugar. So I was like, I guess I'm not going to get gelato. We went to one place and they made gelato with cashew milk and coconut and they flavored it. One of my favorite flavors was ginger chocolate.
Yeah.
And then they sweetened it. I think they had a couple of dates in there to sweeten it.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I got to eat gelato in Italy. And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. It's just pure and so delicious.
But who eats gelato? People on vacation, tourists.
Okay, so that's
It's not the locals eating gelato every day.
Got it. Okay.
It's maybe on a Sunday, you're with your child, with your grandparents walking in the park, special occasion like thing, and they get you a gelato. Definitely not a daily
Not every
event.
day like the tourists. There were so many tourist stores that
Well,
were
think about
gelatos.
July and August, half the continent is on vacation.
Oh,
If you're in a city anywhere in Italy in July and August, there's a 50% chance you're a tourist. Because every factory is closed, the schools are closed, everything's closed except for the tourists, the hotels and the restaurants and the museums. Everybody's on vacation, going off somewhere to have fun.
okay. I was there in April. But yeah,
So yeah, that's definitely not, that's the working season.
the working season.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, so I want to see if anybody has any questions. So if you have any questions for Dr. Massley, please type them in. Go to Amazon or wherever you want to get a book, and it's then come here, drritamarie.com/Mediterranean. MED, I think I might have spelled it wrong. No, I didn't. MEDITAR. Oh, it should be. I think I spelled it wrong. Oops. So spell Mediterranean wrong. I'm going to put this link. Let me put this link in the chat on Facebook. I'll get it there in a minute.
Mediterranean,
I spelled it wrong. I can't believe it.
Terranean.
Try to spell it properly. You're not going to get there.
I have probably typed the word Mediterranean
I bet
1,000 times in the last several months, and it's a hard, just finger-wise, I think it's a hard word to type.
It's a hard word to spell, and I was typing.
I could spell it almost backwards at this point, but
funny.
I will still, when I type it, I'll get a typo probably a quarter or a third of the time. I don't know what it is about some combination of those letters.
It's hard.
It's
It's
a
hard in the
challenge.
RR and all that. I should have just called it med, but I made this up already. So let me type it into the chat, because what I just put into the chat was wrong. Sorry, guys. I am not the best typist or speller. I was trying to type it wrong, and I did it wrong. So let me put it in there. Oops. I'm just trying to copy it because I have the Facebook open on my phone.
But yeah, I would think for you, a food eating plan that's mostly fresh, local, plant-based,
Yeah.
flavorful. For knowing you, Rita Marie, as I have for 8 years or so
A
now.
long time, right? Yeah, that to me, and simple, right? Simple. I loved what you
Yes.
said about the greens. That's my favorite way to eat greens, is to saute them with a little garlic And I'm going to try, like if I had rosemary, I'd grow rosemary and oregano in the garden and just put a few sprigs of that on there. Would be phenomenal. All right, so I'm putting this in here.
Yeah, and try maybe a touch of lemon zest and just a dash of lemon juice on it too.
That's how I spelled it. You know, it's interesting because my son likes to cook. Where wonder where he got that from. And when he's off to college, and he'll tell me, "I just discovered the best thing to add to a stir fry: lemon juice." I'm like, "Oh, I never thought about lemon juice in a stir fry," and it just brings out the flavor. And the
Yes.
lemon, the sourness will tone down some of the bitterness in the vegetable, but still.
Yeah,
have-
especially the bitter greens. It really
Yeah.
is, it's really nice when you're going to eat more. A lot of us are, I'm trying to eat more bitter greens, and having a little bit of lemon juice makes it easier.
Greens, and I love it, but I do a lot of lemon with them. So I never thought to add it to a stir fry, though. I do it when I do a smoothie and when I'm doing a salad. Angie says hi, Dr. She said hi, Dr. Masley and Dr. Rita Marie. Monica says, I just bought your book. Could you talk about getting down LDL with familial hypercholesterolemia without taking statins?
So there's several things that help lower your cholesterol in a Mediterranean. The fiber is probably by far the most important. So more and fiber from vegetable, fruit, beans, nuts. That's that soluble fiber source that so binds to cholesterol and helps your levels drop. Clearly, not eating. I'm not against all saturated fat and cholesterol. I don't, eating cholesterol, in saturated fat, I'm not like coconut. I don't see it as really that bad, but it does actually, coconut products can raise your cholesterol a little bit, even if it improves the overall profile and the size of the particle count. So I think really the fiber is the biggest, most important thing. And most people don't come close. I mean, the average American gets 12 grams a day.
Yeah.
Recommendations from like health organizations are 20 to 25. But people following a Mediterranean lifestyle are probably getting 30 to 40 grams of fiber a day, and it makes a big difference. It's dose dependent. So it might take a while to build up to that, or you can get a little gassy if you go from none to a lot all at once, but it makes a huge difference. And I think then if you're worried about your cholesterol, most people are thinking of their heart. The number one cause for heart disease is not cholesterol, it's blood sugar, it's glycemic load. So the most important thing if you're trying to protect your heart and improve your cholesterol profile is less sugar, less glycemic load, which this program is all about. And then your LDL particles will be big and fluffy, your HDL will be big and fluffy, and you won't grow plaque. Yeah. So more important than lowering LDL is to have big fluffy LDL and big fluffy HDL, so you're not plaque
If you haven't
producing.
tested that, you can do that with an advanced lipid panel, and that'll show you your particle sizes. And if indeed you are one of these people who has this familial hypercholesterolemia, in addition to the impeccable diet, there are a few nutrients you can add, things like CoQ10.
So yeah, it's a really good point. That I would think anyone who's worried about their cholesterol should look at an advanced lipid profile, because it could be, hopefully it would be very reassuring. It might be.
It could be that it's
especially if you eat the way Rita Marie's been asking you to eat. I would expect you to have more big fluffy LDL and big fluffy HDL, and it would look better in that than it would just looking at your LDL.
Just looking at the pure numbers, right, exactly, good point. I think that's all we have in terms of questions. If you have any questions, put them in there. Monica says thank you. So this has been a great talk with Dr. Stephen Masley, and we've been talking about Mediterranean lifestyle. And he's the author of the new book called The Mediterranean Method. And in it, he has a whole section after section of description of the different aspects of the diet and how it works for weight loss and what the different components are. And then he has a whole bunch of recipes in the back. And when you buy it on any of the booksellers, and then you go to drritamarie.com/Mediterranean, spelled incorrectly, I put it in the chat, MED, shows you, MEDITARRAENEAN. Wow, I spelled it really wrong. Spelled the way I put it in the chat, and that will help. But then he'll send you links to some videos of him in his kitchen. So he's the doctor chef that goes in the kitchen and loves to make videos, just like me. You guys love watching me make food. And I think when you watch somebody make the food and get excited about it and try different flavors, it gets you really motivated. So, any parting tips for people on how to make it easy to adopt this kind of an eating plan?
I think it's to getting started. A lot of people procrastinate and they're waiting for something to fall apart before they make a change. So my message is you could feel better almost immediately by adapting this kind of lifestyle. Oftentimes my patients tell me after having tried this for 2 to 4 weeks, they say, I forgot how great I could feel. Thank you for giving my life back. That's the biggest thanks I get for getting people to do this, is helping them realize they can feel fabulous, eat amazing food, and it's easy to do. So get started, don't wait, feel your best, and don't procrastinate.
Great words of wisdom. So thank you for all the sacrifice you made in traveling around the Mediterranean for 7 months to put
It
this
was
book
tough.
together. It was very tough, I'm sure, but somebody had to do it, right? So thank you for all that, and we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.